Today, we'll talk about underrated songs you need to hear, hidden gems from both contemporary and classical music.
Underrated songs you should hear. Hidden gems of contemporary and classic music. In a media landscape dominated by streaming algorithms, commercial charts, and social media trends, countless remarkable songs are overlooked or underappreciated by the mainstream. This article explores the notion of underrated songs, those musical pieces that have not received widespread recognition despite their artistic merit, emotional resonance, or cultural significance. Drawing from various genres and eras, this journal article outlines criteria for identifying underrated music, analyzes select case studies, and reflects on how digital culture shapes visibility and discovery. Finally, it offers a curated list of songs that deserve renewed attention, encouraging a more mindful and exploratory mode of listening. 1. Defining underrated in the music landscape. Expanded. In the evolving ecosystem of music consumption, the term underrated has emerged as a popular yet complex label used to describe songs or artists who are perceived as deserving greater recognition, popularity, or critical acclaim than they currently receive. However, this notion is inherently subjective and context-dependent. To meaningfully engage with the concept, it is essential to unpack its various dimensions and the mechanisms through which music is elevated or ignored in public consciousness. A. Objective versus subjective criteria. An underrated song is not simply one that is unpopular or obscure. Rather, it is one whose artistic merit, emotional impact, cultural significance, or innovation is disproportionate to the amount of attention it receives. This includes underexposure. The song may not have been marketed effectively, distributed widely, or picked up by major platforms. Overshadowing. It may belong to an album or artist with one or two major hits that eclipse other equally or more compelling tracks. Misalignment with trends. Some songs fall outside the aesthetic preferences or genre trends of the time, making them feel out of place or ahead of their time. Determining what is underrated involves qualitative evaluation of a song's musicality, lyrical depth, innovation, and cultural resonance, in contrast to its quantitative visibility, such as chart rankings, radio airplay, or social media virality. B. The role of music industry structures. The commercial music industry heavily influences which songs become popular through label support, radio deals, influencer partnerships, and playlist placements. Many high-quality songs from independent or niche artists never gain traction simply because they lack access to these promotional pipelines. For example, an R&B artist on an indie label may produce a song with rich vocal delivery, expert production, and emotionally resonant lyrics, but without label-backed promotion or placement in curated playlists, the song may remain largely unheard by mainstream audiences. Thus, underrated often points not to musical inferiority, but to visibility inequality. C. Cultural and historical contexts. Underratedness is also historically contingent. Some songs receive renewed appreciation years or decades after their release, when cultural tastes shift or when a new generation discovers them via sampling, soundtracks, or viral trends. Examples include Kate Bush's Running Up That Hill, which was relatively modest in popularity during its original release in 1985, but surged in relevance after being featured in Stranger Things, 2022. Nick Drake's discography, almost unknown during his lifetime, has become widely revered posthumously for its emotional nuance and poetic lyricism. These examples highlight how time and cultural context affect a song's visibility and can turn previously underrated tracks into classics. D. Listener subjectivity and emotional connection. Importantly, a song's underrated status often reflects a deep personal resonance for individual listeners. What one person sees as overlooked genius, Another may find unremarkable, highlighting the emotional and experiential nature of music appreciation. Listeners often call a song underrated when it speaks to a specific emotion or experience rarely reflected in popular music. It displays technical or lyrical mastery that goes unnoticed. It becomes a personal anthem that feels intimate and undershared. In this sense, calling a song underrated is sometimes less about cultural critique and more about advocacy for art that has moved us deeply, but remains hidden from the mainstream spotlight. To define underrated in music is to acknowledge the disparity between artistic value and cultural recognition. It involves examining the systems of exposure, taste, marketing, and memory that determine which songs rise and which remain unheard. As such, identifying and amplifying underrated songs becomes both an act of cultural resistance and musical discovery, challenging the dominance of algorithms and trends in favor of deeper, more democratic listening. 2. The importance of discovering underrated songs. Engaging with underrated music expands musical literacy by exposing listeners to diverse styles and voices, fosters deeper emotional connection with art that feels personal or underdiscovered, challenges algorithmic filtering, which tends to reinforce listening bubbles based on previous behavior, supports lesser-known artists, helping create a more equitable and diverse musical ecosystem. In a cultural era where virality can eclipse artistry, actively seeking underrated songs becomes both a creative and ethical listening practice. 3. Criteria for selection. In curating a list of underrated songs, the following factors were considered. A lack of mainstream recognition, e.g., not charting high or featured widely. Critical or fan acclaim from niche communities or retrospective reviews. Innovative structure, lyricism, or production quality. Emotional or cultural significance that may have been overlooked. This selection spans genres and decades to highlight the diversity of underappreciated excellence in music. 4. Case studies of underrated songs. A. Elephant Gun, Beirut, 2007. With its Balkan brass and poetic melancholy, this song encapsulates Beirut's global folk sensibilities. Though beloved in indie circles, it remains largely unknown to wider audiences despite its rich instrumentation and emotional gravity. B. River, Ibeyi, 2015. A hypnotic blend of Afro-Cuban rhythms, minimalist piano, and Yoruba chants, River by the Franco-Cuban duo Ibeyi evokes themes of ancestral memory and rebirth. Its spiritual weight and rhythmic inventiveness make it a standout in modern world music. C. No Cars Go, Arcade Fire, 2007. Overshadowed by hits like Wake Up and Rebellion Lies, this track from Neon Bible is a soaring anthem about escape and imagination. It pairs emotional urgency with orchestral rock grandeur in a way that remains deeply resonant. D. Paper Bag, Fiona Apple, 1999. Though Fiona Apple is a celebrated songwriter, Paper Bag remains underrecognized compared to Criminal. The song delivers raw introspection with jazzy piano lines and a masterful blend of cynicism and vulnerability. E. Polaris, Ash, 2007. This Britpop-era track combines melancholy with anthemic energy. Its melodic guitar lines and introspective lyrics offer a heartfelt meditation on loss and longing. 5. Cultural and algorithmic barriers to visibility expanded. The modern music landscape is shaped not only by artistic merit but by the systems and structures that determine which songs are heard, promoted, and remembered. B. Cultural bias and linguistic dominance. In addition to technological filters, cultural hegemony, particularly Western and English language dominance, continues to impact global music visibility. Songs outside dominant cultural spheres often face challenges such as Language barriers. Non-English songs may be less likely to appear on global charts, despite emotional or artistic excellence. Exceptions like BTS or Rosalia prove the rule, not the norm. Genre bias. Genres rooted in indigenous, regional, or alternative traditions, e.g., Qawwali, Tuareg rock, Afrobeat jazz, are often sidelined unless packaged for a Western audience. Media gatekeeping. Western-centric publications, award shows, and industry narratives often shape what is considered important music. This means that even critically revered songs from Latin America, Africa, Asia, or the Middle East can remain underrated globally due to limited cross-cultural infrastructure and exposure. C. Economic inequality in promotion. Beyond culture and code, financial resources play a central role in determining a song's reach. Labels and artists with more funding can invest in playlist placement through digital marketing firms, press coverage in major music outlets, influencer promotion on platforms like TikTok and Instagram, professional music videos and tour support. Independent or low-budget artists, despite having masterful work, often lack access to these mechanisms, keeping their songs within niche or regional circles. This economic imbalance ensures that much of the best music remains underrated simply because it lacks access to promotional ecosystems. D. Fast-paced listening culture. The modern music consumer is often inundated with rapid-fire content, encouraged to swipe, skip, and scroll. This high-speed consumption creates an environment where depth is devalued. Songs that require multiple listens to appreciate are at a disadvantage. Narrative-rich or unconventional tracks are skipped for lacking immediate gratification. Shelf life of songs is shortened. New tracks may go unnoticed if not immediately viral. Consequently, slower, introspective, or structurally complex songs, even when beautifully crafted, tend to be underappreciated in favor of trend-conforming bangers or soundbites. E. Underrepresentation of marginalized voices. Historically and currently, songs by artists from marginalized racial, gender, or LGBTQ+ communities have been underpromoted or miscategorized by the music industry. Even as representation improves, structural inequalities persist in label investment, radio play, award recognition, genre categorization, e.g., Black artists being restricted to urban categories. This systemic exclusion has resulted in generations of songs that remain underrated not by merit, but by marginalization. Correcting this imbalance requires intentional support for diverse voices and redefinition of what constitutes mainstream music. The reality of being underrated in the music world is rarely about artistic shortcomings. Instead, it is often the result of algorithmic blind spots, cultural hierarchy, and inequitable access to promotion. These structural barriers obscure some of the most emotionally resonant and artistically innovative songs from global ears. To uncover underrated gems, listeners must go beyond what the algorithm serves, seeking music that lives outside the commercial spotlight. By doing so, they not only expand their musical horizons but participate in a more inclusive, intentional, and ethically aware culture of listening. 6. Recommendations. A curated list of underrated songs. Expanded. Curating a list of underrated songs is both an analytical and emotional endeavor. These recommendations span multiple genres, time periods, and cultural contexts, unified by the shared quality of being artistically compelling but commercially or publicly overlooked. The following songs were selected based on musical innovation, emotional depth, lyrical sophistication, and uniqueness of sound, alongside their relative lack of mainstream recognition. Each entry includes contextual notes explaining why the song is considered underrated, as well as what makes it worth listening to today. A. Time Moves Slow. Bad Bad Not Good Foot Sam Herring, 2016. Genre: soul/jazz fusion. Why it's underrated. This emotionally haunting track blends smooth jazz instrumentation with raw, aching vocals from Future Islands frontman Sam Herring. Despite its cinematic beauty and cult appeal, it remains relatively unknown outside niche jazz and indie scenes. It deserves wider recognition for its expressive subtlety and timeless melancholy. B. The Greatest, Cat Power, 2006. Genre: indie/folk. Why it's underrated. Although Cat Power is well respected in indie circles, The Greatest is often overshadowed by more visible singer-songwriter ballads of the 2000s. The song features tender lyrics about impermanence and self-worth, laid gently over soulful Memphis-style instrumentation. It's an understated masterpiece of quiet resilience. C. Archangel. Burial, 2007. Genre: ambient, electronic, dubstep. Why it's underrated. This track was a cornerstone in shaping the sound of experimental dubstep and ambient electronica, yet it remains largely unknown to the mainstream. Archangel is textured, emotionally evocative, and moody, with fragmented vocals and ambient beats that simulate urban loneliness. It's revered in electronic circles, but deserves broader recognition as a genre-defining piece. D. You and Whose Army? Radiohead, 2001. Genre: art rock/experimental. Why it's underrated. Tucked within Amnesiac, this track is often overlooked in favor of the band's more well-known songs. Its progression from eerie whisper to full-blown crescendo mirrors the experience of internal confrontation and rebellion. It's a concise, emotional epic that showcases Radiohead's creative risk-taking at its best. E. Bridges, Broods, 2014. Genre: electropop/indie pop. Why it's underrated. Bridges is a lush, layered, emotionally rich song that balances melancholic lyrics with soaring synths. Despite its accessibility and strong vocal delivery, it didn't achieve the recognition it warranted in the crowded pop market. A compelling listen for fans of Lorde, Chvrches, or Robin. F. Me Voy, Julieta Venegas, 2006. Genre: Latin pop/alternative. Why it's underrated. A song of graceful departure and emotional freedom, Me Voy blends accordion-driven pop with poetic Spanish lyrics. Although well known in some Latin American markets, it has not crossed over to global audiences as it should have. Its charm, lyrical maturity, and catchy instrumentation deserve a place in global playlists. G. The Way It Used to Be, Pet Shop Boys, 2009. Genre: synth pop. Why it's underrated. This melancholic track captures the sorrow of romantic nostalgia through sweeping synths and understated vocals. Despite being a gem from the duo's later catalog, it's rarely discussed in retrospectives. A modern classic for fans of electronic pop with lyrical sophistication. H. Cicatriz ESP. The Mars Volta, 2003. Genre: progressive rock. Why it's underrated. A sprawling, 12-minute epic of musical chaos and control, Cicatriz ESP takes listeners on a journey through genre-bending sections, from explosive rock to jazz interludes to psychedelic noise. While critically acclaimed, its length and complexity have kept it from broader appeal. It's a brilliant entry for listeners seeking boundary-pushing artistry. I. Winter Song. Sarah Bareilles and Ingrid Michaelson, 2008. Genre: singer-songwriter. Why it's underrated. A seasonal duet of exceptional emotional resonance, Winter Song explores themes of loneliness, waiting, and human connection with poetic delicacy. Despite occasional seasonal spikes in popularity, it is rarely recognized as one of the strongest vocal duets of its time. J. Doomed. Moses Sumney, 2017. Genre: experimental soul. Why it's underrated. Doomed is an existential ballad that questions love, mortality, and identity. Sumney's ethereal falsetto floats over minimalist synths, creating a deeply spiritual atmosphere. The song is critically praised but largely absent from mainstream consciousness, possibly due to its abstract and non-commercial nature. What these songs share. Despite differing in genre, time, and origin, these songs share the following characteristics. Emotional authenticity. Each song offers an unfiltered expression of human emotion. Artistic integrity. These tracks prioritize craftsmanship over trend chasing. Underexposure. All have avoided widespread popularity due to structural, algorithmic, or cultural reasons. Listening to them requires intentionality and openness, but they reward the listener with depth, nuance, and a broadened musical horizon, encouraging exploratory listening. In the age of algorithmic suggestion, many people consume music in predefined loops. A curated list like this invites listeners to step outside of algorithmic comfort zones, support under-recognized artists and traditions, experience the diversity of emotional storytelling in music. By exploring these underrated songs, listeners become part of a more conscious and inclusive music culture where appreciation isn't dictated solely by virality, but by value. Listening beyond the surface. Underrated songs are the hidden architecture of music culture, quietly influencing, evolving, and resonating outside the limelight. Engaging with them not only enhances musical appreciation but also supports artistic equity. In an era dominated by attention economy, listening becomes a radical act when it involves patience, curiosity, and openness to the unfamiliar.